Alright, Magisters Terrace 15. I wanted to talk through this dungeon because I have been having very mixed feelings on it. I have both hated it and loved it at the same time, and I feel like it's starting to grow on me a little bit now that I'm starting to figure out a lot of the mechanics, but I just want to talk through playing the Brewmaster in this run specifically, but we're just going to jump right into it. I am going to have my talent build down below, as well as some logs linked, so you can kind of see what the damage breakdown looks like, the healing breakdown, and etc. This wasn't like the cleanest run, but we did time the key. Anyways, moving to the first poll, they have made a slight improvement. I think the last time I talked about it, it was really like a slow start because you normally just had to face off against this sentry. Now they added some additional melee men and some casters who will cast bolts and polymorph at your team. And so those are the things you want to make sure you kick. Obviously, if a polymorph goes off, that's okay. You just need to make sure that the healer is like dispelling it, or you have some kind of way to remove it with like Imp Dispel, for example, is a good one. The sentry does an arcane beam on random players, and then I think the other two guys were just like mailing me. Anyways, moving to the next hallway, we're going to actually do a pretty big pull. There is 3 melee mobs at the start, then there is a caster with a couple of melee mobs in the middle, and then at the very end of the hallway, there's one more caster. So if you kick the middle caster and then run to the end, you can also use line of sight like I did there for a second. It's pretty easy to get this stuff stacked up. Now, this dungeon, you can, there's like okay, so like this dungeon's super linear, which makes it difficult to have any kind of advantageous routing in here. If maybe you commit invis pots or you're very specific with your movement through here, you could maybe pull certain things and skip others later, but most likely the standard route will probably just be really optimizing certain like RP checkpoints. So for example, now we are down in this little like maze area. The route through is always the same. You like start at the like left lower corner and you go to the right and then use a kind of like zigzag across like we're doing here to approach the kind of mini boss of this room. Now you have to kill the mini boss in here before you can actually get out of this area. So I definitely slow roll this a little bit. You could be a little bit more aggressive, except these animated codexi, they do like random group damage. So pulling them with the Pyromancer can be dangerous because she does this ignition cast, which while it's an active aura on her, you can see like a very tiny debuff on her frame. We all have a debuff that's causing us to take fire damage. And so with all of the codexi, whatever the term is, and this lady, it can be pretty dangerous without like heavy cooldowns and a way to quickly dispatch it. Anyways, you can actually get through most of this area without pulling any of the casters. You can pull more in this area and skip some later, but I'm going to try to get all of these mobs onto the sentry. Now, as you can see, threat is still an issue. These little lighter blue arcane blueberry men, they teleport out to random players in range. So if you don't get quick threat on them in some capacity, they're going to port out and then like someone else will have threat or your healer will. So that's probably my biggest complaint about this dungeon. Any mobs that teleport away, especially at the start of combat, extremely annoying. Now, what's nice about these sentries is they have like a lot of health, so it's going to be really good for like funnel classes. So think historically Assassination Rogue or Havoc Demon Hunter. These mobs will, you can kind of drag around for a bit. So once the rest of the mobs die and it's just a sentry left, I actually head up and grab these like worms, which I think ends up actually kind of hurting us because I think when these worms die, they blow up and do damage. I think, maybe. Something happened where when they all died, we just got I think our healer just got destroyed here, which is okay. He's going to be able to make it back where we're going to battle him. I don't remember. And so you don't have to clear this entire boss room. We are in technically the first boss room of the dungeon at this point. We are, well, specifically, I'm choosing to pull everything because I just like to have a lot of room to work with in this room. And I think the trash isn't like too terrible. Now I was going to try to be careful here and only pull this guy, but our mage decides to tag this next pack. And then he takes a bolt and some aggro to the face. And so if you're a mage player, go fuck yourself and stop pulling for the tank. Let the tank pull. It's all good. So he gets to learn the lesson of you can't do damage when you're dead. I just think the Pyromancer with all the worms and having another caster in the pull that's casting polymorph and bolts can overlap and can cause problems. Obviously, coordinated groups will probably have no issue doing these kind of pulls, but it's like, just let the worms die first before you pull an extra shit. I don't know. I hope the mage has a lovely day, though. He pumped in this dungeon. So yeah, these Pyromancers, this Pyroblast will pretty much one-shot someone, so as long as you have a kick for it, you're good. But that's another reason I didn't want to pull more than one caster, because I don't just trust people to get kicks. It is a long run back, so if you die and you release, be prepared to waddle. All right, now we are now pulling the first boss. So this is the Arcanotron Custos. His mechanic's pretty easy. His rotation's pretty easy. He's going to start with the tank knockback, and then he goes Arcane Expulsion, which spawns this like arcane poop on the ground. So you just move the boss a little bit, and then he's going to target a couple players with debuffs, and then that's it. And it's rinse and repeat. So he's going to do that one more time. Here's the slam, knocks me back. Then he's going to drop poop in a second, so I want to make sure it's nice and like near the other pool so we maximize our total encounter space. And then he's going to go, shortly after that, he's going to go into a phase where he's doing a refueling protocol. So now he's going to be basically spawning orbs and sucking them up, or trying to, if they approach him. And players want to soak. Now, when a player soaks, it does leave pools on the ground, so you want to be a little careful, and it gives you a damage taken increase for every orb you soak. So you want to soak early and soak often, but you want to let your stacks drop as well. Now, the reason I had him up against the wall here is because for some reason, the orbs, less orbs spawn, at least of the time of recording this video, and they spawn, they need a specific amount of distance away from the boss that they need to spawn at. And so when he's up against the wall like this, orbs are only coming from 180 degrees or like 150 degrees kind of based if you can tuck them into a corner in any kind of way. And so that is just a way to have players easily travel from orb to orb while also maybe able to drop their stacks. I don't know if that made sense. And yeah, so yeah, that was probably really dumb. So I'm trying to, again, tuck them into this corner because orbs should only spawn in this like 120 degree angle. As you can see, none of them are spawning in like that far deep corner. They're basically spawning in the poop here that I'm going to be soaking and spawning off to his right. And as you can see, now there's like no orbs spawning at all because they're trying to spawn in a different area in the encounter space. And so I'd imagine that this might be a bug and Blizzard could try to fix it, or they might end up reworking this boss because that is like a clunky strategy. And you can high roll or low roll the orb spawns, basically. I've had a couple of run throughs in here, like on 12s or 13s or whatever, where the orbs like 2 spawned in total, and you're like, oh, that's it. Like, it's not even a phase at that point. So they might end up reworking it if that's like a common report, but it's either way, it's like, I think it's a good fight, even if it does work like that. So anyways, this area is very terrible. These spell breakers that I'm currently targeting apply a really nasty bleed. And so you want to try to minimize how many you end up pulling. We have some Magisters, as we've seen before, who cast Arcane Bolt and Polymorph. Polymorph went off there on Terrathal. He quickly got dispelled from our monk. And now we're moving on to the next pull. We have some of these little blueberry guys who do teleports. You're going to see where it gets annoying again. Like right when they come in, they start running out. Someone else rolls Rip's Threat. I Ring of Peace, but then it teleports behind, so I still don't have threat. And so like this area is like, these kind of mobs are really frustrating. I'm thinking about running Ox at you, or playing with classes that have MDs would be probably also good. But this is a pretty advantageous pull, so we do want to be a little careful. But yeah, these Spellbreakers are applying bleeds to people. Now, luckily, they tend to prioritize now with a recent update. They tend to prioritize like currently bled players, like targeted players. A couple weeks ago when we did this, they sometimes would target the same player and the bleed would stack, and generally that person would probably die because you can already see one stack of the bleed is like destroying our monk right now. Luckily Demon Hunters have like a fair bit of leech self-healing, but yeah, our monk is getting absolutely destroyed. So you want to be careful in this hallway. Again, it's extremely linear, so there's not really any possibility to like skip around these mobs without obviously like some type of coordination with like some kind of meld skip or like a invis thing. I don't know if they have spectral sight. I actually never checked. So if they have spectral sight, it's like GG anyways. And so yeah, then we'll be moving on to the boss. So next we have the Seranel Sunlash. This fight is going to be a massive healer check, and it's going to be a slight coordination check. I think Pugs might struggle with this fight, honestly. So what happens is he, similar to the trash before, he applies people with this runic brand or runic mark. And it's a bleed. And it's a bleed that cleaves. So you want to spread out with these circles. Now the way you remove the bleed, because it is permanent, is by moving into the suppression zone that the boss spawns. Now the reason that this boss is extremely difficult is because every other set of brands that are applied, or whatever it's called, runic marks, you may or may not have a suppression zone. Therefore, you might have to sit with it on you for a little bit. Then when you drop it by walking in, it does a burst of damage, spawns a bunch of swirls. As you can see, it actually ended up just killing our mage because we dropped 2 at the same time. It does like a burst of damage, spawns swirls, and it applies a dot, I think, to the entire group. Or at least a damage shaken increase. And then Vow of Silence is like, it ends that set of the phase. Like that first phase is now over. And so it gets rid of the suppression zone. It silences all players who are not inside of that circle. I believe Terrathal wasn't inside, so he ended up getting silenced there for like 6 seconds. Very annoying. Make sure you move inside. You do get silenced for a second, but step in and then move out and then you're good. So here we go. We had to sit with these debuffs. Best case scenario, I think Blizzard should update it to make it always go on the tank. There's not really a massive tank buster in this fight. I tried dropping a Transcendence there, rolling in and then Transcendencing, and then I realized I'm like, oh wait, I'm silenced. I can't do that. So that's why there's a little bit of a pause there in the gameplay. But basically, I think it always going on the tank would make it feel a little bit better. When it goes on like 3 DPS or you're a healer and 2 DPS every single time and they eventually run out of defensives, it can be a little annoying. I wish it would like always go on the tank and then it would rotate between the 2 players who hadn't already gotten it. Like if it was like our monk and our warlock, it would then be our DH and our mage. And then at least that way players are able to cycle through defensives. Right now, with it being a little RNG like this, it requires a lot of kind of reaction, self-sustain healing from the healer. You get in phases like this where the suppression zone isn't down yet, so people start bleeding out pretty quickly. Again, luckily it was on me for that last one, but if it's not on the tank, your DPS just like vanish. They get vaporized. Anyways, once that boss goes down, we are now channeling or draining the shield. And so you want everyone up here. The more people channeling, the faster it'll channel for. And then we're going to be, again, moving back through the dungeon in a very linear fashion. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of RP here. So you kind of have to wait for the mobs to spawn. Because if I've done this as a tank where I like run all the way down the hallway and then mobs spawn here. And then you don't have threat, people die, and then you're getting yelled at and people leave. And it's pretty chaotic. But what I do like about this dungeon is that most of the pulls from here on out are going to be really, really big because you get a ton of little fodder mobs, which is very fun as a Brewmaster. You end up doing a ton of damage here. So there's one caster. It's this Void Walker. Just kick the Void Bolt and you're chilling. Everything else is kind of just like mailing the tank for the most part. Some of them teleport out and like take a swing at your allies, but not a huge deal. Once the caster dies, that's going to enable us to continue pulling. So we're going to have some like little voidlings. Oh, they're actually called voidlings. I was literally just using that as a term. Little voidlings. W, dude. Oh my god, I'm so smart. And then we have like this mini boss in the area, this void caller. So void callers are the easier of the 2 big blueberry men. So this guy just spam summons little ads, which can be good, but also can be bad. Let's say you're playing with an outlaw rogue, which maybe they got reworked and they're changed and it's not this way anymore, but they lose single target damage as you add more targets. And so like for an outlaw rogue, this kind of mob sucks because you end up killing it a lot slower because the little ads are kind of eating up that damage. Funnel classes, though, are probably really going to like this dungeon. And so playing with something like a Havoc or a Sin, or I'm trying to think of like other like true funnel classes, you're going to hopefully kill that guy super, super quick. Now, these Void Infusers are probably the scariest mobs in here. They don't do a lot of damage, but they cast this ability called like Void Surge or something, which will cause you to flee in fear. And so whenever you have a Void Infuser on the call, you only need one person to watch for the kick, but you need to watch the kick. If everyone gets sphered for 5 seconds or 3 seconds or however long it is, it's going to result in a wipe. And you're actually going to probably see that in a few minutes here. We end up wiping to a fear going off a little bit later in the dungeon. There was like an accidental kind of CC break that wasn't supposed to happen, but did happen, and it ended up wiping us. And so now we are in the 3rd boss room area. You have to clear the entire zone to spawn the boss, which is a little unfortunate. This boss is also really boring and probably pretty easy to pull trash onto. So there might be a world where you can maybe skip through onto the boss and then like back pull, would be my guess or assumption or my thought process to it, because waiting around for RP and then also like basically having a turning dummy boss is really boring. Anyways, what we're seeing again are mobs that we've seen before. We have Voidwalkers just casting bolts, just kick them. And we have the Void Caller spawning ads and being kind of a nuisance. Now the other side is where it's going to get pretty dangerous. So I'll talk about that when we get over there. So now that pull is dead, we are heading back over. A couple more Voidwalkers. We're going to have to get a couple kicks here on these bolts. Now there is one Infuser in this other pack and this Devouring Tyrant. So it's the Tyrant that has the shoulder pads, and the other big blueberry mob has like a hood on, is the best way to like tell them apart. Obviously you can also look at their name. Now this guy, I think it's like every 15 seconds, he does a really nasty tank buster. And this tank buster is absolutely brutal. It doesn't do damage, or at least it doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does apply a super, super nasty, like full health bar absorb to the player. It's like a physical debuff, so there's no way to like remove it. Maybe like Dwarf would be fine. You can AMS it as like DK and stuff, but when you have a lot of other mobs in the pool, it's really difficult to get that shield off every 15 seconds. And so tanks like Death Knight, tanks like Guardian Druid, Protection Paladin really kind of struggle at clearing that shield quick enough. So I'm hoping that Blizzard maybe changes that in the future. All right, anyways, moving on, we have Gemellus. Gemellus? This is the third boss. This boss has seen a couple of different reworks since its original inception on Alpha. The current state is he's basically going to spawn 2 little squid men, and they're going to rotate around the room. Every once in a while, they're going to do void secretions, which spawns pools under players who are targeted with arrows over their head. Shortly after that, they're going to also cast like an astral grasp, which will suck players who are targeted towards said squid, whichever one ends up targeting you. So the boss is going to target a player, and then the 2 other like little squid, octopus, jellyfish things are going to also target additional players. Later on in the fight, he's eventually going to spawn 2 more. So eventually everyone's going to be getting sucked. Everyone's going to be getting dragged. They also do this thing called Neural Link, which I will be able to show a little bit later because generally the tank doesn't get targeted early on in the encounter. Basically, you're going to get paired with one of these jellyfish, and you have to run up and connect with the jellyfish, or it has a sizable absorb shield. Now, this is mostly important if it's on the boss, because all of these mobs have shared health, but if you happen to miss one, you're going to be kind of wasting damage, or it's going to be going to an absorb shield. As you can see there, I was getting sucked through one of the pools, so I swapped to the other side. As a tank, I was fine. Our mage, I think, had the same fates and ended up dying. So you do want to be a little careful of that. Now, I don't think we're going to end up rezzing him, but the rest of the fight should be pretty simple. So I'm getting targeted with this arrow over my head, which means I'm going to drop a void secretion under my character. And then here's that targeting. So the jellyfish is going to glow red. I'm going to have a red circle. There's like a beam of light that comes down on the ad you have to connect with. This wasn't super telegraphed previously. This version makes a little bit more sense, but it's still not straightforward. I think a lot of pub groups might actually struggle with this, and it's going to be really frustrating to watch the boss constantly gain really big absorbs. Now, unfortunately, when you're getting dragged by 2 of these jellyfish, the pull is really strong if you're getting pulled in the same direction by both, but moving in between the 2, I was able to get dragged. Now, that's only a problem if you have a player dead. So once again, here's that Cosmic Sting. It's going to drop those pools. And then here's those absorbs once again. So I'm getting targeted. It's going to show me an arrow pointing towards the jellyfish I need to walk into. We're going to walk into them, and then they will break. And so as a tank player, you're trying to keep the boss near or on top of another ad, so you always have 2 target cleave to work with, because again, they do have a shared health pool. If not, multi-dotting is also really good for this fight. I think Boomkin's Shadow Priests, maybe LA Shamans will have a field day. Everyone else, get fucked. I don't know. Anyways, moving into the final encounter kind of area of the dungeon, we are going to be walking all the way up the stairs, and all of these guys are just basically mailing the tank, so these mobs you definitely want to run with if you can. And then at the very top of the stairs, we have 2 of these Void Infusers, and there's a third one in the following pack that I wanted to pull. So my idea was like, oh, I'm going to CC one out with Paralysis. Unfortunately, though, I think we end up like whiffing kicks here. There is a Void Surge cast going off. We eventually get the kick, but someone broke the CC behind me. I don't know why, don't know how, don't know what happened. But that CC being broke caused us to get feared, which then ended up, we wipe, like simple as that. So in a coordinated group, I think this might be a possibility. Also, maybe you just don't pull this pack also, though I do think that this mob is a lot easier than other mobs that we could potentially pull. And then unfortunately, there is this weird like global combat thing. As you can see, numbers are still ticking. So all the mobs start like teleporting down. So we end up actually kind of chain wiping here, which is not good. I was thinking like, oh, maybe if it's not all of them, we can just stand here and just cleave them down. But we were going to get spam feared. And once again, you're going to see us kind of like getting chain feared here and just dying. So the pull resets. We put a lot of deaths on the board. I thought that would have bricked the key, but somehow having 19 deaths, we're still on pace. That obviously comes down to playing with pretty decent DPS players and like pulling fairly large. So once again, we're going to keep it slow. I'm just going to pull these 2 Void Infusers. I learned my lesson. I've done that pull successfully with other groups if people are paying attention to the right mob, or if you leave the CC'd mob out, but when it does get broke, not sure what broke it, fears, yeah, leads into an instant wipe. Maybe there's a world where you play with like Warrior who gives everyone AoE fear immunity. Easy. So yeah, this Void Surge is probably the scariest cast in here. Luckily, we were able to stop that with a pair of Ring, and I think we also might have gotten the kick. And now we are going to pull this pack per usual, per intended. The Devouring Tyrants, there's a Devouring Tyrant upstairs, and then above that, there's even more Devouring Tyrants. So I'm pulling this mob to hopefully not have to pull those guys with those massive absorbs. DKs are really cool because they can immune with AMS, but you can't immune every one. So you live the first with AMS, then you have to use a big defensive and maybe like Vampiric, Vamp Blood, there we go. And then you can do like AMS again. But if you miss any of those, you're pretty much dead. Paladin was also the same issue. Like, if you get the absorb and you're at full health, your Word of Glories don't hit very hard. So it's really difficult to heal through the shield. And when you're at low health, you're probably gonna die. And so it's like Paladins I've kind of struggled with in here. And like Guardian Druid without like Incarnation and the ability to spam Frenzied Regen also struggles. Now you're always gonna have to pull 2 of them. One is in the boss room down below, and then one is gonna be up here. There's also one down below that we skipped past. I don't know if you noticed that. And there's also one on the other side of this like circular platform room that we're currently on. Now, generally what groups have been doing is they pull this pack really far ahead into the next pack, which has those Devouring Tyrants. But if your tank can't handle it or your group doesn't have big damage or lust, it's not quite worth. So I am kind of slow rolling this. Now, what's nice is the next pull has a Devouring Tyrant and the Void Walker, whatever the guy's called. So regardless of it being a 2-pack or a 2-target pull, you're going to get a lot of like funnel. Oh, it's a Void Caller. He's going to constantly spawn ads anyways. So if you are playing with funnel classes or classes that benefit or do more damage with obviously more targets, it's good that they're both here. Now, luckily, Brewmaster's pretty good at handling this absorb. They're staggering most of their damage. Their self-sustain is fairly high. And like a 5-stack Expel Harm with Ox Orbs, pretty potent. I'm sure maybe I need to create a dwarf character and come in here and test. I'm pretty sure dwarf racial would probably remove it, which is unfortunately making it feel like a very impactful dwarf season. My general stance on racials is that they don't matter for 99.9% of players, but if you are trying to make your life a little easier and dwarf ends up working on this debuff as well as a bunch of others, probably not a terrible idea to go dwarf if you don't mind playing it, but I'm not advocating for people to pay for race changes or anything like that. I'm not going to change the dwarf. If dwarf is good and you're willing to play it, then play it. But it doesn't matter because most of the stuff can be outskilled or outgeared or whatever. Anyways, we are now moving into the last boss with exactly a little less than 3 minutes left. The rest of the bosses in this dungeon I don't find particularly interesting, but this is probably one of my favorite bosses of the entire season, at least so far going into Midnight. Now, this is a volleyball boss. Starting off the encounter, he's going to debuff a bunch of players. It's 3 in total. The healer's goal is to slowly dispel them over time, or you just wait for them to expire. Now, it is a dot, but when it expires, you're going to see these orbs radiating outwards, which will root you if you get hit by an orb. Getting Rooted is only a problem during the kind of the volleyball soak. So as you can see, I'm kind of like shifting around, dodging these orbs. There's also a small tank buster. Now, what's nice about this boss is he can't move. And if you do leave melee range, he doesn't like one-shot your group. He's casting bolts at the tank. Like his auto attacks are like basically like bolts. And so you can leave melee range and he's just going to keep autoing the tank. So if you are solo soaking in your quadrant, and it's kind of further back out of melee range, it's fine. You can move out of melee range and not wipe your group, which is nice. Now, I am playing with the Devourer in my section. I think you could have the tank solo a slice. The reason I'd want to solo the slice is because this tank buster is like a little annoying when there's players on all four sides of me. There's someone on either quadrant to the left and right and someone straight forward, so I can't like move into the boss. And backing up means I will hit the Demon Hunter. And the only time that's a problem is when I'm dodging orbs, which also kind of doesn't matter either because I'm not soaking. But I just think it's safer to like have the tank soak than have a DPS soaks. Because DPS will eventually run out of cooldowns, and the dot does a lot of damage. When you soak, you get a short dot, which will do damage over time, naturally. And I think our mage will end up dying here, actually, to the dot. He had Ice Cold active. We're both going to end up soaking here, which means we both get the dots. I was waiting for the DHs to move out, because I'm like, I'm in melee, so I might as well soak. And our healer is, like, pretty much so we got to be a little careful. Yep. Or maybe it was Terrathal who went down. Maybe I thought it was the mage. Anyways, very smart play by the DH here. He actually shifted over to the right to take over where Terrathal was, playing the Warlock. So now I'm able to soak the orbs, but it's fine because Degentrius, is going to go down right here. And we end up finishing the key with a couple seconds left. I actually wasn't even paying attention. So yeah, that was Magisters Terrace. I've been slowly warming up to this key as I've gotten comfortable figuring out like what the casts do, how to pull certain mobs, stuff like that. So pretty good run. When it comes to the logs. So this is something that I've been wanting to like kind of show, but have been kind of lazy and I would forget. So our overall damage, the DH ended up at 173. Okay. And then our Terrathal was at 137, and then the mage was at 123. Now, do note that the mage was dead on a lot of the pulls, and dead on the third boss. I did end this run at 71k DPS. I'm not sure how that really shapes up compared to other tanks, and I finished at 40k HPS. Now, what I wanted to point out here is that Refreshing Drink as an Apex talent is really, really good for just sustained healing. It is healing us 50% of the time, and of course, the other 50% of the healing is hitting some of our friendlies. Now, it does go on closest players, which means that melee people will generally get the Refreshing Drink hot more often. That, Celestial Fortune, and Vital Flame are our top 3 healing in this key, followed by Gaiplins, followed by Gift of the Ox, followed by Celestial Brew, and then Ox and Fortitude, which is funny because Ox and Fortitude is mostly just going into our cow. And so Celestial Brew clearly is super undertuned in its current states. They definitely need to improve this. Now, I probably could have gotten a lot more than 45 casts, but regardless, I think the total absorb it does per cast is really low. So if you're looking at average cast being 45, and I did just under 5 mil healing, that means the average cast of it was 100k, a little more than 100k, which is like not that much of our health. We have a lot of health in game. And so that's pretty good. Also, one thing to note, the defensive trinkets I was running ended up being a grand total of like 8%, 9% of my healing between Eggshell and Gloom Splattered Scale. Now, Gloom Splattered Dread Scale actually does like a okay bit of damage. I haven't found a trinket that does more damage directly on use, but also you can make the argument, well, it's like, well, if you were running a crit main stat trinket, you'd probably do more damage. So that's something to keep in mind. Something else that I've mentioned in the past, Extra Kick is something that I was confused on because it was implemented into the class before we got our tier set, but I believe it is our tier set. See, you can see the tooltip now. So it's our tooltip basically, but I think it was working earlier in alpha or beta without having the tier set even equipped. So that's kind of interesting. Now, Special Delivery surprisingly did very little damage. And so I've been trying to figure out a build or potential builds where you don't even play Special Delivery or Rushing Jade Wind because I don't think there's room in the rotation, which is something that's kind of interesting. But yeah, there's my breakdown. So I'm going to leave this log link as well as my talent build down below. You can also see the talent build in said logs. this was what I was running. I think maybe dropping Special Delivery for just Heart of the Ox would actually give you probably more damage, because 5% attack or 5% mastery ends up being like a fair bit of attack power. And then during your cooldowns, you have even more attack power, which should end up being more survivability. And I think just a 3% damage loss here for a 5% mastery gain could end up being better. But I'll let the Simlord nerds figure that out. One last thing. I was playing Chi Wave. I feel like Chi Wave is working better in the rotation, though it's clearly not a significant portion of damage. It only did 0.5%, where I think Chi Burst would probably be in the realm of like at least 2 to 3%. And then when it comes to healing, Chi Wave actually wasn't terrible, but also 1.6 is pretty low. But it's all passive. That's kind of the benefit of playing Chi Wave. I wish they would buff it. I wish it was more competitive. It just isn't in almost any case. But the rotation feels a little bit more fluid when you don't have to worry about channeling or casting a spell that can get knocked back from melee attacks that is a frontal. Like, it's just clunky now with the Apex talents resetting Keg Smash. Anyways, I don't want to rant too long about Brewmaster specifically. That was Magisters Terrace. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Happy holidays, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.